Hello everyone, and welcome back to the How to Build an RTS game from Start to Finish series, where we learn how to build a game from the ground up while completely at the mercy of you guys. Hey guys, in our last video, we created a way to start moving our units around. If you haven't seen that one yet, check it out as we're going to be using the same project, and I'll link to it in the card and the description below. However, this time we're going to add more data to our units and probably set some custom things inside of our inspector so that way we can keep our code easy to understand and access when we start adding more functionality to our movement systems and even fighting later on our battle systems. So let's just go on ahead and get started. The first thing I want you to do here is if we take a look at our healer, our warrior, and our worker, we have a bunch of stats in here, but it's kind of sloppy. They're just kind of all over the place. We kind of already set them in somewhat of a decent order, but we want that to be a lot cleaner. So that's what we're going to do right now. When editing the way your custom inspector looks, there's two ways you could do this. You could either edit the editor, which would allow you to place functions in here as well and buttons and do lots of fancy things. Or you could just add some specialized headings and things like that inside of your inspector, which is actually what we're going to do right now. And if you guys want to learn more about making custom editor windows and things like that, just let me know in the comments. If we get enough people interested in it, I wouldn't mind teaching you that as well, since I'm not really sure we'll be fully implementing that in this game. So in order to start adding these things in, let's open up our basic unit script. Now, before we start adding stuff in, we are not actually going to be setting this bool based on our unit itself. We're going to do that somewhere else. So let's just get rid of this now. Okay, now we're going to add brackets and we will type header, open parentheses, unit settings. Okay. Now let's go down to, let's say right here, and we will say brackets header, say unit stats. Okay. So let's save that and let's go see what that did. Now, when we look at our healer, we see we have this heading here, unit settings and unit stats. So it kind of breaks it apart for us a little bit. Now, I don't like how these are so close together, and I would actually like a little bit of more spacing in here. So this is how you do that. Let's hop back over into our basic unit script. Above our header and type space. We'll do 15. This takes the height that you want your space, so we're going to use 15. And actually, let's just save this, and I want to show you what that does. So what that did was put space below the heading. Okay, so we put it above our header, and it actually put it below it, which is important to remember because when you want to add space in between something like this, first thing you want to do is we'll add that space again below it, right? Now, in order to add space above it, you actually just want to go right below it and we'll add it here. So we'll do space, let's say 40. Okay, and I'm actually gonna clean the way this looks up a little bit. And actually, I do want to change the name of this up a little bit. We're gonna say it's the unit base stats because these stats will change during game time and stuff like that. So we just want to be able to set the base stats for right now. And since we're setting this, let's go on ahead and add one more stat here. And we'll just call it attack range. There. Now let's go see what this space here did. So let's hop back over into Unity, let it compile. Now we have a larger space in between our variable types here. So now I know if I want to edit anything about the unit settings, I'll do it here. If I want to edit anything about the unit stats, I do it here. And that actually applied through everything. So now let's actually set some of these stats. So let's go to our worker. I'm just going to say he costs, say, 25. He has well, 2 attacks, fine. Attack range, 1, it's very low. 50 HP, and no armor. Okay, let's do the warrior. Let's say he costs, I don't know, 100 to make. His attack is 50. His attack range is also 1. His health is 100. And he has, let's say, 2 armor, for example. Okay, let's check out our healer. Now our healer is going to cost, say, 250. Their attack's going to be, say, lower than a normal damage person, so, and their range is going to be higher, right? And let's see, health, maybe we'll make that lower as well, so we'll just do 50. And our armor is 0. Okay, so now we have stats that are set up for each of our units. So we need to actually add this functionality into the game. So in order to do that, we're going to hop to our unit handler script now. So the first thing that we want to do is set this as a singleton, since this is only ever going to be, there's only ever going to be one instance of this script in the scene at any given time. So we'll do public static unit handler instance. Okay, and then we'll create a start function, and we will say instance equals this. Now we need to add some references to our basic units for each type of them. So let's do basic unit, and we need a worker, a warrior, and a healer. Oh, we also need to come here and say, we don't need to access this from anywhere else, so we're going to make this private. Now, in order to set these, we're going to go above it, and we'll say serialize field. Okay, so let's go see what that does now and just go on ahead and set them. So normally when you set it private, you can't see the variable, but now, where is it? Okay, you can actually see them here. So we need to go find it in our scene. So we have worker, warrior, healer, and we need to set these types. So let's set our healer, our warrior, and our worker. There. Okay, let's head back over into our unit handler script, and let's write our first function here. So this is going to be, it's basically an integer function, but we get to pass multiple, we get to use multiple integers, so that way when we return, we receive multiple stats back at once. So normally an integer function would look something like this, and then we would name it, something, and it would look something along these lines, and then you would have to return your answer. In our case, what we want to return are all of these stats. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to say int, and we're going to follow the same naming convention. So we're going to say cost, attack range, health, armor. Okay. So cost, and you can name these whatever you want. I'm naming these to be very specific so I know what it's talking about. So we're going to do cost, and we have attack, and we have attack range, right? And then we have health, and we have armor. Okay, and then we'll close this off. And I'm definitely not going to name this something. Get basic unit. Oops, basic unit. And we want a way to tell it what type of unit. So we're just going to use a string and say type. Okay. Now, obviously, we can't just return one, so now when we return, we have to return them all. However, we want to know first which unit we're returning, right? So we're going to say, we're going to get a switch statement going, and we want to check the type, okay? Now we're going to say case the type is worker. Then, you know what? We need a way to let it know that it's a unit. So let's say basic unit, and we'll just call this unit. Now we'll say in case it's a worker, unit equals worker. So worker, we're referencing the worker here, okay? Break. Now we'll say case it is warrior, okay? Unit equals warrior. Break. And case it equals healer, unit equals healer. Now we want a default just in case this is incorrect. So, or just in case none of these match for some reason. So we're going to say if none of these are true, then debug.log, and we will say, okay, so that I noticed that I use this a lot and I never explain it. So this $sign and then quotes, this just allows me to add our variables in while still within the quotes. Otherwise, when you only use quotes, you have to say like something and then go on the outside of your quotes and say, plus our variable and then plus, whatever. So this just saves a little bit of time on that. So we're going to say unit type, and then we'll reference the type. Could not be found or does not exist. There. And then if it doesn't exist, rather than hitting break here, we're going to return our function, and we're just going to give the values set to 0. Okay, and we have 5 values, so we need to return 5 zeros, right? And these zeros are these values. Okay, so we're returning straight zeros. Okay, and then down here, we're going to return, and now we want to return the correct values based on the type. So we're just going to say we're going to use unit.cost, unit.attack, unit. Oops, no, we just want attack. Unit.attack range, unit.health, and unit.armor. Okay. So now, if we want to, we should probably specify here, get basic unit stats. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're asking if they want worker stats, we need to go to the worker and we need to grab all of these, and then we're going to return that to them. So now we also need a way to access that, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So we're going to come down here and create a new function. Actually, before we can do a little bit now, so let's just do it now. So public void, and we'll do set basic unit stats. Okay. Okay. So right now, the first thing we need to do is say for each transform child in type. Then we want to get the children of those, because we kind of did this in a different script as well. But so if we send them player units, we get these children, and now we know that we have these, and then we want these specific units, so we have to get the next children. So, but we also want to do it for each one of them, right? So now we'll do for each transform unit in child. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to set a string, and we'll call this unit name, and we're going to make this equal to the child name. We're going to make this a substring because our names have an S on them, and we don't want this S. So we're going to fix that now because we would need it to match just like this, right? So in order to get these capital letters down and remove the S, first thing we're going to do is remove the S, okay? So we're going to start from the beginning of the string, and then we're going to do the child dot oops, name dot length. So we're going to the part we're messing with is from the beginning to the end, and we want to subtract it by 1, okay? So we're just removing the last letter. Now we want to make it all lowercase, so we'll say to lower, okay? All right, now let's do, and the reason, okay, I'm going to explain this just a little bit more. The reason we're going to use var here, or variable, is because in order to call this type of function, okay, it has a bunch of integers, and these aren't stored like like an array or anything like that. So what we have to do if we didn't use var would be int, int, int. So that's 3, 4, 5. And this is very, 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 very inefficient. Nobody wants to sit here and type int, 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 int. Okay, so we're just going to type var because it already knows what I want. Whenever I plug something into it, it knows it knows that's what it needs to be. Okay, so we're just going to call this stats since we're grabbing the stats, and we're going to set this equal to, and we're going to call this function. Okay, so it is equal to get basic unit stats. So we'll say get basic unit stats, and what do we have to give it? A type. So the type we want to give it is going to be our unit. Oops, we don't need those. Our unit name. Okay. Now we need a way to access our player unit script that is on each one of these objects. So we're going to say player dot player unit. We're going to call this pu is equal to unit dot get component player unit get component player dot player unit. Okay. Now we have access to this specific script that is on this specific object. So now let's set unit stats in each unit. So the only way to set the stats in the unit is to have some way to store those stats, right? So let's go to our player unit script and let's make that now. So we need to do a public int, and we have, let's see, cost, attack, attack range, health, and armor. Okay. So now let's go back and set these to the correct value. Now we say we want to access that script on that object. We want to access its cost, and we'll equal it to stats.cost. Okay, and stats, remember again, is what we picked up here. pu.attack equals stats.attack. Let's see, attack range equals stats.attack range. And let's do health. Oops. And finally, we'll do armor. There. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is because at some point we may have buffs on our characters, or maybe we have upgrades or something. So later on, we'll be able to grab the information from these character types, and then we can say, if we have any upgrades, add them now, right? And this is where we would potentially add upgrades to unit stats, right? We don't have any right now, so we're not going to worry about that. So now that we have these stats applied to our player unit, we need to actually call this function. Let's do that in our player manager because it requires this to be declared already. So we want to make sure it's declared before we actually call. So we also want to add a public transform, and we'll call this enemy units. Okay. So under creating this as an instance, which means this is finally set, we are going to, we need to access our unit handler script. So it's not that far, so we'll just do units dot unit handler dot instance dot set basic unit stats. And then we first are going to set our player stats. So let's do player units. Okay. And then we will just do this again. But we're going to change this to enemy units. But for now, we're going to comment this out because we're actually going to have to do something slightly different for the enemy units. And the reason I say that is because in here, we're picking up the player unit. So we'll have to actually put an if statement in here if we have, once we have our enemy scripts. So let's actually grab this. All we need is this, right? So we're going to cut this and we'll say if type is equal to fdg.player.playerManager dot player dot instance dot player units. So if it's player units, then we want to set our thing to player unit. Okay. So we actually want to copy this, or let's cut this out now, and we'll just say pu here, and we're going to define player unit. Okay. Then later on, when we have enemies, we would actually just say else if it's an enemy, right? So type equals fdg.player.playerManager dot instance dot enemy units. Okay. Oops. Then right now we're gonna do nothing right now, and if it's not. So because of that, if we run into the else, it's gonna not let us do this. So we actually need to set this for now inside of here. There. Okay, then I'm gonna fix this because we actually need to say else if. And there we go. Now, if we go back to our player manager, we could actually uncomment this now. And it won't actually run anything. So we'll just say set enemy stats for now. Okay. So that would mean we would have to create an enemy stat script, which currently would only have this in there. So I'm not actually going to set one of those yet, but we can head back to Unity now. Actually set our enemy units. We need to do that first. So drag and drop enemy units. Okay. Now let's test. And we look at our human unit. Now you see this, they have the same cost as our worker. So if we look at them now, nothing. However, if let's say we put one in warriors, let's say we got a healer, okay. Now let's hit play. And there we go. We have our worker stats. This one's still worker stats. And our warriors, we have warrior stats. And our healers, we have healer stats. And then our enemies, right now, we have nothing. Because eventually we're going to have to write an AI script that's going to handle our enemies, and that will contain the stats. But that's going to be for another time. So guys, I really hope that you enjoyed being able to kind of customize your inspector a little bit, add a little bit more functionality into our units, and then put those units onto our game objects in the scene. And that's actually going to get us a little bit closer to being able to start attacking our enemy from the proper ranges and things like that. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you aren't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And until next time, guys, peace.